Have you ever wondered why some men, maybe even you, seem to keep repeating the same emotional pattern no matter how hard they try to change? They fall in love, lose themselves, then wake up years later wondering who they've become. It's not weakness. It's not stupidity. It's something far more ancient, far more psychological. Carl Jung called it the mother complex. And if you've never heard that term before, it might already be running your life. Because here's the truth. Most men are not living from their authentic masculine center. They're living in reaction to a mother, sometimes the literal mother, but more often the internalized, unconscious image of her, the soft authority, the emotional gatekeeper, the first judge of their worth. And until you confront her shadow, she will control every relationship you have. Maybe you already feel it, that strange inability to say no, the need to be seen as a good man, the hunger for approval from women, even when it costs you your truth. Or maybe you're the opposite, shut off, withdrawn, terrified of intimacy because some part of you learned that closeness always meant control. Either way, the source is the same. The wounded masculine doesn't begin in adulthood. It begins in the cradle, in the ways we were soothed or not soothed, in the subtle cues we picked up from our mothers about who we had to be to earn love, and more importantly, who we were not allowed to be. Jung believed that the mother is not just a person, she is an archetype, one of the most powerful psychic images in the male psyche. She is the first world we know, the first voice we respond to, the first standard we try to live up to. And that's why her influence doesn't end in childhood. She shows up in your adult relationships. She shows up in your emotional triggers. She shows up every time you abandon yourself just to keep the peace. See, the mother complex is not about blaming your mum. It's about recognizing how your psyche formed around her. If your mother was overprotective, you may have learned to doubt your own decisions. If she was critical, you may have become a perfectionist, always trying to earn her silent nod. If she was emotionally unavailable, you may now chase after women who echo that same emotional distance, hoping this time the story ends differently. But it never does. Because you're not dating women, you're dating wounds. You're trying to heal the mother through the lover. And that is a trap with no bottom. Here's what no one tells you. The most dangerous thing a man can carry is unconscious loyalty to his mother's shadow. It sounds noble. It looks like being a good man. But it's not strength. It's self-abandonment. It's smiling when you're screaming inside. It's choosing peace over truth. And eventually, it becomes resentment. Because the boy who never got to be himself becomes the man who doesn't know who he is. And the mask he wears, that charming, easygoing, ever-applicable mask, is just armor. Armor he learned to build at 6 years old. Armor that helped him survive in a home where being fully himself felt unsafe. But now, that same armor is killing him. Because now he's a man, and a man's soul cannot live inside a boy's survival strategy. Jung called this the crisis of individuation, the moment when a man must differentiate himself from the mother, not to dishonor her, but to become himself. That is the beginning of true masculinity. And yet, it's terrifying, because the mother archetype isn't just nurturing, she's also devouring. She clings, she enmeshes, she makes you believe that your worth comes from your usefulness, that your identity exists to serve, and that any attempt to separate is a betrayal. But here's the truth that will set you free. You are not her emotional husband. You are not her therapist. You are not her second chance. You are not the balm for her wounds, the answer to her loneliness, or the guardian of her unmet dreams. You are a man, and your life belongs to you. When a man begins to wake up to the mother complex, it feels like rebellion, but it's not. It's liberation, Because for the first time, he's not living for someone else's narrative. He's asking a question that was once forbidden. What do I want? And that question is dangerous to the old identity. It threatens the mask. It threatens the relationships built on appeasement. It threatens every coping mechanism you've used to avoid the one truth you've never been allowed to say. I don't want to carry this anymore. Maybe you grew up being told you were the strong one, the easy one, the calm one, and so you became that. Always solving, always stabilizing, always swallowing your anger just to keep things okay. But who decided that was your role? Who benefits from your silence? Who keeps you small in exchange for love? The mother complex is not just a wound, it's a psychic agreement, a contract you signed without knowing, and like all soul contracts, it must one day be broken if you ever want to be free. Because you cannot become the man you were meant to be while still trying to earn a woman's permission to exist. And yes, it will hurt. There is grief in letting go of the boy who tried so hard to be good, the boy who thought if he could just be enough, she would finally see him, finally hold him, finally say, "You don't have to prove anything, you're already enough." But that moment may never come. And so you must create it yourself. You must become the man who gives that to himself. The man who turns toward the wound and says, "I see you." The man who chooses truth over peace. The man who leaves the emotional orbit of his mother, not out of anger, but out of devotion, to himself, to his future, to the woman he has yet to meet who deserves the real him, not the version still trying to finish a childhood chapter. This is the beginning of sovereignty. And it starts by walking away, not from love, but from the illusion that love requires self-erasure. It starts now. But here's where most men stumble. When they begin to awaken from the mother complex, they don't know what to replace it with. They've spent their entire emotional lives orbiting around her needs, her moods, her expectations. Without that gravitational pull, there's a disorienting silence, a terrifying freedom. It's like stepping into a vast field after living in a cage. You're not sure where to walk. You're not sure who you are without someone else telling you. That's when the temptations creep back in, to retreat into another relationship, to find another woman to rescue or fix or impress, to repeat the cycle in slightly different clothing. Because even pain can feel safer than the unknown. Even dysfunction can feel like home if it's what you were raised in. And that's the hidden danger of unconscious loyalty. It makes you sabotage your own escape. You'll call it love, you'll call it chemistry, you'll call it fate. But if you look closely, you'll see it for what it is: repetition, compulsion, a psychic reenactment of the original bond. Not because you're broken, but because your psyche is trying to finish a story that was never meant to be yours. This is why Jung said the mother is both life-giver and life-thief. Because until you differentiate from her, you are not truly alive. You're animated but not sovereign. You're moving but not choosing. And every woman you meet becomes a projection screen for your unmet needs. You either idealize her into a goddess or resent her for not rescuing you. Either way, she's not seen, she's not loved, she's used as a tool in a drama that began before you could even speak. And the tragedy is most men never realize they're doing it. They call it romance, they call it destiny. They say she completes me, but no woman should complete you. Because the masculine is not made to orbit around the feminine. It is made to stand in its own axis, to hold its own gravity. Only then can it meet the feminine as an equal, not a surrogate. This is the hard truth you must face. Until you heal the mother complex, your love will always have an agenda. You will not be fully present. You will be managing, fixing, overcompensating, performing, or worse, withdrawing, punishing, avoiding. But what you won't be is whole. And that wholeness is the goal of individuation. It's not about rejecting women, it's not about rejecting your mother. It's about integrating what she gave you and releasing what no longer serves. It's about honoring her as a part of your story, not the author of your identity. Individuation means claiming your inner authority. It means becoming the father to your own soul. And that means grieving the childhood you didn't have, grieving the emotional freedom you never got to feel, grieving the boy who lived in fear of disappointing her. But through that grief comes rebirth, a quieter, sturdier kind of power, the kind that no longer needs validation, the kind that no longer performs, the kind that can love without losing itself. This is not something society teaches men. In fact, it punishes them for even trying. A man who sets boundaries with his mother is called ungrateful. A man who chooses himself is called selfish. But that's only because our culture is addicted to enmeshment. We don't celebrate sovereignty, we pathologize it. Especially in men. Especially when that man dares to say, "I am not here to be what you want, I am here to be who I am." And that's why this work is sacred. Because it doesn't just liberate you, it liberates the generations that come after. When you break the pattern, you stop passing it down. You stop turning your partner into your mother. You stop raising sons to be emotional caretakers. You stop raising daughters to perform for love. You interrupt the lineage. You create space for real love to emerge, the kind rooted in presence, not projection. But make no mistake, there will be resistance. Your inner child will cry out. He will say, "This isn't safe." He will say, "We're going to lose her." He will say, "We need her." And you must look him in the eyes and say, "I know, but I've got you now." That's how the cycle ends, not through war, but through reparenting. Not by killing the mother, but by embracing the father within, the one who protects, the one who provides structure, the one who says, "You don't need her approval to exist." That is the voice you must cultivate, and it doesn't come overnight. It comes through ritual, through silence, through saying no when you were conditioned to say yes, through choosing yourself when everything in you screams to abandon. It comes through holding your center in the presence of feminine chaos, not to dominate, but to remain unshaken, because the mature masculine is not reactive, he is rooted, he is discerning, he sees through the seduction of the unresolved mother and chooses the woman who doesn't ask him to shrink, who doesn't need him to fix her, who doesn't demand he prove his worth, because he no longer carries that silent contract. He has broken it, and now he is free. But freedom isn't loud, it's not flashy, it's not about control, it's about choice. The choice to stay, the choice to leave, the choice to feel, the choice to say no, not from anger, but from clarity. That is what the healed masculine looks like. He doesn't rescue, he doesn't chase, he doesn't beg, he sees, he chooses, he leads, not because he needs power, but because he knows where he's going. And if you've never seen that kind of man before, it's probably because most men are still trapped in loyalty to a ghost, trapped in identities built on pleasing, trapped in shame passed down through maternal fear. And if that's you, it's not your fault. You were trained for this. You were conditioned to be emotionally useful, to be her confidant, her peacekeeper, her good boy. But that role is killing you now. It's time to lay it down, to walk away from the altar of her pain and build your own temple, one made not from guilt, but from gold. One where your inner voice is not drowned out by hers. One where your desires are not filtered through childhood scripts. One where you finally get to ask, "Who am I?" when I'm not trying to be who she needed me to be. That question is the threshold. Everything begins there, not with blame, not with revenge, but with deep, unwavering honesty. The kind that burns, the kind that heals, the kind that says, "I love you, but I will not die to stay connected to you." That's the paradox of masculine healing. It looks like separation, but is actually integration. You're not leaving love, you're leaving false love. You're not rejecting your mother, you're releasing the part of her that lives in your choices, and in doing so, you become something this world desperately needs, a man who is no longer afraid to be whole. You begin to see it everywhere once you wake up to it, in your friendships, your work, even your silence. How much of what you've built is actually yours? How many of your accomplishments were fueled by a desperate need to be seen, not by the world, but by her? That quiet, unresolved ache to finally be told you're enough. You chase success, discipline, strength, stoicism, but beneath it all is the little boy still holding out his hands, still hoping that maybe if he just works hard enough, sacrifices long enough, becomes impressive enough, he'll finally be chosen. But here's the truth you must reckon with. If you're waiting to be chosen by your mother's ghost, you'll never choose yourself. You'll never rest. You'll never know peace. Because the child in you is still chasing what was never given. And that child has no concept of time. He doesn't know she's never coming back in the way he hopes. He only knows the ache. So you repeat. You overfunction. You become the hero. Or you become the rebel, the failure, the dropout. Any identity strong enough to mask the unbearable truth that you feel emotionally invisible. This is where the mask becomes your prison. You've worn it so long you think it's your face. The provider, the stoic, the nice guy, the emotionally detached intellectual, or maybe the perpetual fixer, always rescuing broken women who remind you just a little too much of her. And every time you lose yourself in another crisis, another heartbreak, another role you never asked for, you abandon yourself again, not because you're weak, but because you were trained to. Emotional self-abandonment isn't a flaw. It's a skill, a survival mechanism you perfected as a child to stay safe. And now it's killing your authenticity. Because self-abandonment doesn't stop at relationships, it bleeds into everything. Your career, your purpose, your creativity, your body. You become a ghost of your potential, haunting the edges of your life while convincing yourself you're doing fine. But something inside knows better. Something inside still whispers that you were meant for more. And not more money, not more attention, more freedom, more inner alignment, more truth. But truth is terrifying when your identity is built on being agreeable, manageable, pleasing. To say, this is who I am, with or without your approval, feels like death, because for the child you once were, it would have been. That's the paradox of masculine healing. You have to die to who you thought you needed to be in order to live as who you really are. And that death is painful. It means facing the terror of being misunderstood. It means risking disconnection from people who only know how to love your mask. It means stepping into a kind of loneliness most men aren't prepared for. But that loneliness is sacred. It's the cocoon, not the grave. And if you stay with it, if you resist the urge to rush back into distraction, performance, or romantic anesthesia, something miraculous begins to happen. You hear your own voice again. At first it's faint, doubtful, but it grows louder. It says things like, I don't want this, or that's not who I am, or I'm done pretending. And every time you listen, every time you act on that voice, you reclaim a piece of your soul. That's how healing works, not in grand gestures, but in small, sacred rebellions. Every boundary you set is a line drawn in sacred ground. Every no you say to an old pattern is a yes to your becoming. Every time you feel the pull to abandon yourself and choose not to, you evolve. And evolution is messy. It doesn't always look noble. Sometimes it looks like walking away from someone who still loves the version of you that no longer exists. Sometimes it looks like disappointing people who once called you their rock, their safe place. But you were never meant to be a sanctuary for other people's chaos. You were meant to be a sanctuary for your own soul. And that's the shift. When you stop orienting your worth around what you do for others and start centering it in who you are, when you're alone, untouched, unchosen, unperformed. That's where sovereignty lives. That's where the masculine awakens. Not in dominance, but in inner authority. This is where most teachings about manhood fall short. They give you rules, roles, strategies, but they don't give you yourself. They don't teach you how to grieve the boy who thought love was earned. They don't teach you how to stand in your truth without needing anyone to agree with it. but Jung did. Jung understood that the path of individuation is not about self-improvement, it's about self-confrontation. It's about looking into the mirror of your unconscious and saying, I see you and I choose you, even the broken parts, even the angry parts, even the shamed, emasculated, exhausted parts, because those aren't your enemies. They're your exiled kings, your denied energies, your sacred rage and holy grief. And when you reclaim them, not act them out, but integrate them, you begin to embody a masculinity that isn't reactive. It's creative, it's protective, not possessive. It's deeply present, not performative. That's what women are starving for. Not a savior, not a fixer, but a man who knows who he is. A man who doesn't outsource his worth. A man who doesn't unconsciously punish the feminine for the mother's wounds. A man who doesn't flinch in the face of emotional depth because he's already faced his own. And you can be that man, but only if you stop trying to be her good boy. Only if you stop spiritualizing your self-abandonment. Only if you stop calling people-pleasing kindness and start calling it what it is: fear. Fear of being left, fear of being unloved, fear of being too much or not enough. But fear is not a command, it's an invitation. An invitation to turn inward and ask, what part of me still believes I need to be small to be safe? And when you find that part, and you will, don't shame him, sit with him, hold him, tell him what he's never heard. You don't have to earn your right to exist. You're already enough. This is the work. It's not glamorous, it's not always visible, but it's revolutionary. And it begins every time you choose self-loyalty over old scripts. Every time you disappoint someone in order to honor yourself. Every time you walk away from a pattern that feels familiar but no longer fits the man you're becoming. You are not here to be consumed by the unmet needs of your mother's shadow. You are here to become whole, to rise not in rebellion but in reverence. For your truth, for your story, for the soul you've kept hidden beneath layers of performance. And once you claim that soul, fully and without apology, something ancient stirs within you. The king returns. Not the tyrant, not the puppet. The king. The one who serves the kingdom of his inner world before trying to rule anything outside of him. And from that throne, you will see clearly. You will love wisely. You will lead justly. But only because you first had the courage to lead yourself. By now you may feel the pull. The instinct to turn back, to soften the edges of this truth, to reframe it as something less intense. But that's just the complex trying to survive, because healing the mother complex doesn't just threaten your emotional habits, it threatens your identity. The man you thought you were, the rescuer, the fixer, the pleaser, the one who can always hold it together, has to die. Not because he was a failure, but because he was a survival creation. A loyal soldier to a psychic empire that never gave him permission to rest. And so rest became a crime, desire became selfish, saying no became dangerous, and intimacy became negotiation. You gave what you didn't want to give in hopes that someone would finally give you what you never got. But when you're loving from a wound, even the deepest connection feels conditional, because you are conditional with yourself. You don't let yourself feel fully, or rest deeply, or rage honestly. You don't let yourself want without guilt. And that's the inheritance of the mother complex, an unconscious belief that your existence must be justified, that your emotional needs are burdens, that your freedom is a betrayal. So let me say this with clarity. You do not need to earn your right to exist. You do not need to bleed emotionally to prove you're good. You do not need to shrink so others can feel safe. You can want, you can leave, you can take up space, and the sky will not fall. The world will not end. You will not die. You might feel grief, you might feel disoriented, but those feelings are not punishments. They are passageways. You are not here to be consumed by the shadows of unmet maternal hunger. You are here to remember your name, to return to the masculine not as a rebellion against the feminine, but as a reclamation of your wholeness. And that means learning a new language, the language of the inner father. The father archetype is not cold, he is not cruel, he is clear, grounded, protective. He creates structure, not to control, but to liberate. He says no more, he says that's enough. He says you matter, and most importantly, he says, I will not abandon you again. That voice, the father within, must rise if the son is ever to become the man. And in Jungian terms, that's the movement toward individuation. You are no longer fusing your identity with the emotional demands of the mother. You are becoming a psychological adult, and not just in behavior, but in essence. You're no longer seduced by chaos. You're no longer seeking crisis to feel alive. You're no longer attracted to women who echo your pain, because pain is no longer your language. Truth is, and truth is quiet. It doesn't perform, it doesn't need applause, it doesn't need to be liked. Truth just is. And when you begin to live from that place, something extraordinary happens. The drama fades, the noise falls away, your decisions become cleaner, your presence becomes potent, and the people who used to feed off your self-abandonment either transform or disappear. Not because you pushed them away, but because they were never aligned with the real you. They were aligned with your mask. And now that the mask is off, only truth remains. That is the spiritual reward of confronting the mother complex. Not just emotional liberation, but spiritual clarity. You begin to feel a deeper order, a sacred design. You begin to understand that everything you thought was your flaw was actually your adaptation. Your overthinking, your hypervigilance, your people-pleasing, they were all brilliant survival strategies crafted by a boy who just wanted to be loved. And now, as a man, you get to say thank you and release them, not from shame, but from gratitude, because you don't need them anymore. You're no longer living in the shadow of her disappointment. You're no longer trying to solve her emotional puzzles. You're no longer letting her pain dictate your path. You are sovereign now. And sovereignty doesn't mean solitude. It doesn't mean cutting yourself off from love. It means showing up to love as your full self, unmasked, unafraid, unashamed. And here's where the sacred irony lands. Once you stop trying to earn love, you become capable of receiving it. Once you stop performing, real intimacy becomes possible. Because now you're not waiting for the woman to fix what your mother broke. You're not begging her to see you. You already see yourself. And that changes everything. Your relationships deepen, your creativity ignites, your presence becomes medicine to those around you. Not because you're trying to be helpful, but because truth always heals. Authenticity always liberates. And you become the mirror others didn't know they needed, not by teaching, not by preaching, simply by being. A man who knows who he is, a man who left the house of the mother and built a home in his own soul. This is rare, this is sacred, and this is the call you've been hearing beneath your anger, your burnout, your confusion. The call to stop running, to stop searching for the mother in lovers, in teachers, in fame, in wealth, and to finally turn inward and say, I am here. That is the holy moment, the moment everything changes, not because your outer life shifts immediately, but because your inner allegiance does. You stop serving the wound, you start serving the truth. You stop kneeling before the feminine shadow, you stand in partnership with the awakened feminine, and from that place everything becomes possible, real love, real purpose, real peace, because the war inside is over. The mother is no longer the god of your psyche. She is no longer the judge, the gatekeeper, the gravitational center of your self-worth. You have dethroned her, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You have remembered that you are a man, not a son, that you are a soul, not a savior, and that you are here not to carry her pain, but to alchemize your own. The path ahead is yours to walk. It won't be easy. Old patterns will whisper, old wounds will ache, but the man you are becoming is stronger than that. He doesn't chase ghosts. He doesn't barter for love. He doesn't abandon himself for comfort. He walks forward with grief in one hand and grace in the other, and every step he takes away from the mother complex is a step toward his kingdom, a kingdom not built on control, but on clarity, not on domination, but on devotion, to truth, to integrity, to the sacred masculine that this world so desperately needs. And so you walk. And as you do, you remember, you are not broken. You are not lost. You are awakening. And this journey back to yourself is the most important thing you will ever do. And now something unexpected begins to emerge. Compassion. Not just for yourself, but for her too. The mother. Not as a goddess, not as a villain, but as a human being, flawed, wounded, doing the best she could with what she had. You start to see the complexity in her. You begin to notice where she was trapped in her own patterns, her own traumas, her own unintegrated feminine. And you stop needing her to be different, not because you approve of everything, but because you no longer need her approval to heal. This is the final test of the mother complex. Can you witness her humanity without sacrificing your own? Can you see her pain without making it your responsibility? Can you love her without losing yourself? Because if you can, then you're free. Not because she changed, but because you did. You stopped being her emotional caretaker. You stopped being her proxy husband. You stopped trying to earn what was never yours to carry in the first place. And in that moment, the pattern breaks. The chain snaps. The psychic spell is lifted. You no longer walk in circles. You walk forward. This is the true beginning of your manhood. Not when you made money, not when you had sex, not when you performed masculinity well enough to gain approval, but when you faced the part of you that still sought permission to exist and gave it to yourself. That's the man who can lead. That's the man who can love. That's the man who can look in the mirror and say, I am no longer a prisoner of my past, because you've done something few ever dare to do. You've excavated the archetype. You've looked beneath the surface of your habits and seen the myth playing out. The myth of the son who lives for the mother's blessing. And you've rewritten the ending. That's what makes you dangerous, not in the way of harm, but in the way of truth. You can no longer be manipulated by guilt. You can no longer be seduced by approval. You can no longer be hijacked by emotional chaos. Because now you know who you are. And once a man knows who he is, the world cannot unmake him. You are not the roles you were assigned. You are not the compensations you performed. You are not the boy who had to earn love with silence. You are the man who survived, who woke up, who chose the harder path. And that choice ripples outward into your relationships, your purpose, your legacy. Because when a man heals his mother complex, he doesn't just heal himself. He changes the world. He raises children who don't confuse love with performance. He builds partnerships rooted in truth, not dependency. He creates not to impress, but to express. And most importantly, he lives deeply, deeply unapologetically. Not for her, not for them, but for the sacred self he reclaimed through the fire of psychological rebirth. And let's be clear, this isn't about perfection. You will still feel the old pull sometimes. You will still hear that ghost whisper in moments of weakness. But now you have a center, a place to return to, a voice that says, I know better. And that voice will carry you through heartbreak, through transition, through the uncharted terrain of a life that finally belongs to you. That's what the archetypal masculine really is. Not domination, but direction. Not control, but consciousness. The ability to hold steady in the presence of life's chaos without abandoning who you are. And that's what makes you trustworthy. To yourself, to others, to the woman who meets you now, not as her fixer, her savior, her emotional mule, but as a man, clear, whole, chosen not because you needed to be, but because you chose yourself first. This is your return, your exodus from the inner exile you never consented to. You are no longer defined by the absence or overpresence of the mother. You are defined by your own becoming. And from that place, the feminine changes too. You no longer attract chaos disguised as love. You no longer need to solve her to find yourself. You meet the feminine now as a partner, not a wound, not a mirror, not a ghost. And in that union, something sacred is born. Not a fantasy, but a third energy, a relational alchemy built not on trauma bonding, but truth-telling. Because you're not looking for a mother anymore. You're ready for a queen, not one to serve, but to co-create with. And that changes everything. Your love becomes clean, boundaried, devotional, not self-sacrificial, fierce but never controlling. Because you're not afraid to lose someone to keep yourself. That's the difference between a boy in love and a man in love. The boy needs, the man chooses, and you've earned your right to choose. So if this message shook something in you, good. That was the point, not to shame you, but to wake you, to call you home, to remind you that the ghosts of your past don't get to dictate your future. You are more than the patterns you inherited. You are more than the boy you had to become to survive. You are the man who decided that survival wasn't enough. And now you rise, not in anger, not in ego, but in sacred defiance of everything that told you to stay small. You are here, you are ready, and the mother's shadow, it no longer defines you. You honor her, you release her, and you walk forward. Into your life, into your truth, into the man you were always meant to be.